Well, for once, that opening video matches the film we are talking about, I think, perfectly, Steve. A lasso and a couple of boots, and certainly a cowboy hat. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode here in our Oscars series where we're profiling one picture that has been nominated for Best Picture here on the Outlaw Nation. And I am one of your hosts. I'm the Outlaw John Rocha, joined by my Cine-Files brother, Steve Morris. How are you, man?
I'm doing great, and I'm so excited. You love Westerns, I love Westerns, and we get to go back to a very, very different kind of Western.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is one that I remember watching it and then I rewatched it again for our conversation, certainly because I just, after a while, you haven't seen a film for a bit, you want to kind of get it in your head and realize where it fits in your mind. I got to tell you, and I haven't said this because I haven't tweeted about this film at all, and I haven't done a review of it on the channel at all. I really enjoyed the movie. I know some people said it's slow, it's really not for them or whatever, but if you're a Westerns guy, or Westerns person, I should say, I think there's enough beauty in the cinematography here in the movie, enough of a story here for you to hold on to. And I like the performances all throughout the film. That keeps me interested, and the subtlety. And Steve, we host the Cine-Files. I think we could go scene by scene through a movie like this and really dissect the symbolism and the messages that are being sent. The obsession of stroking leather, playing with a hand, with a scarf, the soft supine backs of horses inferring homosexuality. Like this kind of, by the way, we're two straight men talking about this movie, just to make it clear. This very interesting approach to this story. And I couldn't disagree with Sam Elliott more. I thought that was one of the most pedantic and simplistic ways to dissect this movie ever. And the idea of holding on to the chaps or holding on to anything other than this is a film that explores repressed homosexuality, but also overt masculinity and how it can be toxic in the world.
Well, just to go briefly on the Sam Elliott thing, the idea, like he's saying that Westerns are this, that
right.
That the genre can only encompass one kind of thing, as opposed to going, the West is an era. It's a setting. And this is as much or more of a Western than anything I can think of. And what's funny is I think you and I maybe have different feelings about the movie, but where I know we're going to agree is top to bottom, this is an exceptionally well-made film.
Yes. And a gorgeous film for sure.
Gorgeous.
And to be fair to Sam Elliott, he did support Brokeback Mountain. So he's not saying that homosexuality shouldn't occur in Western films. What he's saying is there's a certain type of way of approaching homosexuality that he feels should be done in films that are about the West, which I think is very limiting and should not actually be listened to or adhered to in any way, shape, or form. But let's get into a little bit of the specifics here for this one. This is directed by Jane Campion, who is nominated for Best Director, and a lot of people feel it was an odds-on favorite to possibly win come Sunday. It is based on a book by Thomas Savage, which I think he wrote back in the 1960s, if I'm not, in 1967, I think, called The Power of the Dog. And apparently this has been around for quite some time, trying to make this novel into a movie. And it finally happened with Jane Campion shooting it in New Zealand, her native New Zealand. This one starring Benedict, Cumberbatch, Kirsten Dunst, Jesse Plemons, Kodi, Smit-McPhee, Thomasin, McKenzie in a small role, really. And great to see Keith Carradine and Francis Conroy popping into this thing, who I hadn't seen in a little bit as well. And of course, telling the story of two brothers here and how one brother goes off to get married to Kirsten Dunst as Jesse Plemons, and she has a son from a previous marriage, and he is following his father's footsteps, being a doctor. Is he gay or not? I don't know. Or homosexual? It's not really stressed. But then eventually we do find out that Jesse Plemons' brother is played by Benedict Cumberbatch. That's Peter, I believe. He's the one who has repressed his homosexuality and has a very strong connection. Phil has repressed his homosexuality and has a very strong connection to a former mentor of the two brothers called Bronco Henry. And we see how this plays out and how this coming together of two different families causes so much pain and anguish, and eventually a tragic ending overall. Well, tragic depending on your point of view, I suppose. Overall. So Steve, looking back on the film now, and can you give us your overall thoughts on the movie as you think about it and we talk about it here on the show?
So, I mean, I think that from the beginning to the end, you feel that you are in such a sure hand. The pace, yes, the pace is really slow. The performances are spectacular. They're amazing performances. Cinematography is gorgeous. It wasn't a world I liked to be in. And I think that's sort of is it a really good movie? Absolutely. Do I feel like watching it again? You know, you watched it twice. I won't watch this again for years, not because it isn't good, but because I didn't enjoy it, you know.
Okay.
Like that's really the thing for me.
Experience overall is what you're saying. You didn't enjoy the experience overall.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, no, it was not just that I didn't enjoy the experience. I was so uncomfortable. I mean, like from the beginning to the end, it was, I mean, like there's the, you know, the opening where we first meet Kirsten Dunst and we go to the place where she, you know, kind of runs the inn and she's serving people, and all of the behavior from Benedict Cumberbatch, who is fantastic in the film.
Yeah.
But all of the behavior makes me, you know, my shoulders are up. I'm just like, oh my God, this is so painful and difficult for me to watch. So I don't like that experience. You know what it is? You know what I think there's a weird, and this is going to sound like a totally strange metaphor, but I don't like the embarrassment movies. So, you know, the classic Ben Stiller sort of, I'm in an extremely awkward, embarrassing situation. I feel so embarrassed that it's hard for me to enjoy it. And even though this isn't that, in a funny way, I had a similar sort of like, I am so uncomfortable in what's going on right now. Like, I'm really not happy, but you know, it's really, really good.
Yeah, what you're telling me is you're not a Curb Your Enthusiasm guy, is what it sounds like you're telling me. It's not really.
No, well, and in particular, I cannot handle the British Office. The British Office, I can't. Well, I've watched like 3 episodes, and I'm like, nope, can't be here. It's too hard on me.
I'm good. Yeah, but you mentioned. I will say this. For me, this film really works, and I agree with you. It's such a sure hand from Jane Campion. It's one of the most gorgeous westerns I've ever seen. I mean, I think it has shades of the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford in its languid pace, in its subtlety, in its taking advantage of the beautiful landscapes of the West and the way it's shot. And yes, I know it's shot in New Zealand, but it feels like it's shot in the American West, which is really of yesteryear, which is really incredible to witness. And again, mentioning the performances, Cumberbatch, there's something about his voice. I mean, initially with his voice, I wasn't 100% down. That's so funny to me because that seems to be the prevalent thing with Benedict Cumberbatch. I listen to that voice and I'm like, okay, am I in? Am I out? Am I in? Am I out? And then eventually I'm in. I felt that way about Doctor Strange as well, his American voice sometimes, but he's gotten better, I think, with the accent as he's done it more and more. I feel it's more natural as he works on it for sure. But I liked his presence in the movie. And yes, it's unsettling. And Steve, you know this as a director sometimes, the Foley or the sound editing of the boots hitting the ground as he walks, it makes it feel like this menacing, ominous thing that's coming out of any room or coming into any room. Then the whistling, and then of course the change, and it's such an odd moment. And of course, there's going to be spoilers in this. Just telling you right now, the odd change in him when Phil catches him, or sorry, when Peter catches him out there, catches his men's nude magazines, catches him with the scarf that he's been masturbating with, captures him out there in the water. All of a sudden, a turn happens from when he had been persecuting the young kid. Now he's guiding the young kid and in a way becoming Bronco Henry himself. So where was the source of the anger initially, and why did it turn instead of becoming even more angry at the young kid? He ends up becoming his mentor in a way. And of course, possibly, which a lot of people speculated, the kid kills him to save his mom. So what do you think about this relationship as it progresses and as Cumberbatch portrays his character in the film?
Well, you really have spoiled the stuff, so now I don't have to worry about
I mean, for a few months now. If you're watching this without,
So the first thing is I didn't expect any of those things. That there are a lot of movies where I irritatingly would lean over to Carradine and say, "This is going to happen next," and I'm frequently right. This movie, I didn't know any of these things were going to happen, and yet it is all perfectly set up. I think your description of Cumberbatch's character of being a presence is so key to the movie, because every time he walked into the room changed. You know, and this is both his performance and also, as you said, the sound design, the way it was directed, all of the other actors in the room. I think what was so interesting was that when you discover that, he had this Bronco, whatever his name is, maybe that was a relationship and all that stuff, is that you take what you know about him and it flips everything in a different direction. Is that suddenly it's not that the behavior before didn't make sense. It's now it makes sense in a new way. You go, oh, and the thing too is, because of that shift that you talked about, once he kind of changes with Peter and is being nice to him and he's making the lasso or whatever it is that he's making for him, I didn't trust it. I was like, is he going to turn? Is he luring him in to destroy him? Is he? And there's so much ambiguity in here that I can't really know. Well, and even things like Kirsten Dunst, who's also fantastic in the film, like her alcoholism and like how that's handled. That's not a direction I thought this movie was going to go in at all, and it is also extremely painful and difficult, to watch.
Yeah, and you wonder about it too, Steve. What brings on the alcoholism? Is it because she fears her son? Obviously, well, I think the alcoholism initially starts because of Phil's presence, but also how quickly, Jesse Plemons, how quickly George is trying to move her up the social strata when she had been, with a doctor and had been playing the piano for cinema. That was the extent of her life. Now here comes George, scoops her up. I imagine the brothers' business is very lucrative, so they have connections with where is it the mayor or the governor comes to
governor?
Yeah, the governor comes to their house to have dinner. That's high in the social strata back then. I mean, and now obviously, but back then too. So for her to be a part, and you see she's so uncomfortable in that situation, and George is trying to make her play the piano, and George leaves her there to make small talk as if it's not a big deal to George, because George doesn't understand that, like, for other people this is an issue. For him, it's so natural, it's not a big deal, but for her it is an issue, and he kind of abandons her in certain ways throughout the movie. And then when Phil and Peter start developing their relationship, is her alcoholism increasing because she fears Phil hurting her son, or she feels losing her son to another person, to a man here? Or does she know her, or does she suspect her son is a homosexual, and now even more so fears that Phil might influence him to become even more of a homosexual or follow that path, which could cause more pain to him down the road? So there's a number of things that are working here in my mind when I watch this journey as it progresses through the movie that I thoroughly enjoyed being unaware of, or being challenged by, to consider as it was going along.
I think what's so interesting about it is that the George relationship, I don't remember with Kirsten Dunst's character, Rose, George and Rose.
Yeah, Rose.
It's such a lovely relationship, and it feels so romantic. And I really love how George is at the beginning of the film is kind of carving out a different path from Phil. Like you get the sense that they were very together when they began this business and when they were back, in the day, and that now he's decided, okay, I don't want to be the cowboy guy. I want to dress a little bit different. I want to find love. I want things to be romantic. I'm like, oh, this is going really great. And then George is so ridiculously insensitive to what's going on with Rose. I mean, forcing her to play the piano when it is so painfully obvious that she doesn't want to do it. And he just is oblivious to what's happening with her. And then he becomes aware of the growing alcoholism, but then, and I think it's just a downward spiral. I think Phil starts the spiral because can you imagine being brought in to live in the house with Phil?
Right. As we said earlier, such a presence that can influence you if you don't have a steely enough resolve as George has. Phil can influence you and overwhelm you. And even more so when we find out, Steve, later, because Phil is actually supremely intelligent and was knowledgeable about all these other things. So clearly his homosexuality has caused him to put on this exterior of manliness to cover up what was once a supremely intelligent, educated man. Maybe there was a shame there that he's hiding there behind all his rough exterior and this desire of not wanting to clean up, to be part of a more established society.
I think there's no question in my mind that there's shame there. And that mix of, because as he reveals his intelligence, I mean, you knew he was powerful from the beginning, but like there's the moment where she's struggling to play the piano and then he plays the same thing that she's trying to play, I think on a banjo or something like that.
He does it way better.
Way better. And it's just like, that is such a fuck you. And and the thing is too, when the person who is acting as low class as possible suddenly shows this level of education and all these things that he does throughout the film, that is a real power game that he's playing. And I think too, it's like, I don't think anyone could live in that house with Phil and not be affected by him. You know what I mean? Because he's just there's so much anger and pain there. And what's interesting too is the character of Peter, who seems so frail at the beginning, and you feel so and then you start to realize like, oh no, there's a whole thing going on with this guy as well. It's a fascinating movie.
As soon as he dissects the bunny, everything seems to change in your perception of him and what he's capable of and what he's willing to do here in a situation. And as we said, I mean, Kodi Smit-McPhee does a really nice job as an actor in this movie, and seeing the switches. And you're right, both like he seems to come off as, for lack of a better term, in using the Western, a dandy. He seems to come off as a dandy in the film, but in fact, he's got a way stronger interior than you might anticipate. And when they're getting closer, Phil and Peter, there's that exchange where Phil tells Peter, "Oh, my father was afraid that I was too strong." And Peter kind of scoffs and says, "Too strong," as if he himself has been a victim, ironically, of judging a book by its cover, when he himself has put on a different cover than the actual book inside. So a very interesting switch in terms. And then by the end, when he does what he does, Steve, we got to talk about that. Do you believe he kills Peter on purpose in order to save his mother and her growing alcoholism and save that relationship between Rose and George?
I 100% think he kills. It's Phil. I think Phil on purpose.
Sorry, Phil. Yeah.
I 100% think that's what the movie is telling us.
Yeah, Peter kills Phil on purpose. Yeah, with anthrax, because he doesn't tell him the hide was from a dead animal.
Yep.
When he's making the rope. Yeah, and the smile. And remember, he handles the lasso with gloves as he puts it under his bed, which kind of infers that he knows the danger of that lasso. So are we seeing, in some random tangent, the birth of a Western serial killer? I mean, I don't know. I mean,
how do you feel? How do you feel? Well, this is the thing in my mind. Well, that is certainly an interpretation. There's also I'm trapped with a monster who will destroy us all. The only way to get rid of him is to kill him. I mean, but what's interesting too, I think, is that this explodes. There's so much about masculinity and homosexuality and what those things mean, and I think, and strength and weakness, and the historical and ridiculous association between masculinity and strength and femininity and weakness, or homosexuality and weakness. This explodes all of that. This is going no. Those definitions are far too simplistic. People are way more complicated. Those things don't line up at all.
And look, that's true in life, right? We all know the big guy who can wilt at the sound of gunfire or wilt at the sound of violence, and we all know the skinny, scrappy kid who, like Captain America, I can do this all day. You always measure the heart of the person in the fight, not the overall exterior, because you just never know what a person is willing to do. And certainly he was willing to kind of put himself in a position here to Peter was to kill Phil. And I think you might be right. Maybe this is more a matter of like he did what he had to do, maybe even played up. And that scene where they're sharing the cigarette, is that in a way Peter like luring Phil into his trap? Maybe Peter's not even homosexual at all, or to him sexuality is irrelevant for him to use it. So I mean, there's a way to make an argument that he is possibly in the early stages of being a serial killer in the Dexter format, in that he's killing the people that he thinks deserve to die, as opposed to a serial killer who is just killing out of a random desire to work something out within himself. And remember, he finds his father, an alcoholic father who killed himself. So there's the idea of dealing with death is not something difficult for him to confront. And it's not an accident. I also think at the end of the film that he's not around for when Phil is heading off to the hospital, heading off to the doctor, and wants to give him the lasso. Peter willingly keeps himself away from Phil so as to not like give any kind of evidence or make it seem as if he might be guilty of killing Phil in the end, which I think is really interesting and powerful. And as you said, twists and turns here you don't see coming, which makes the film for me an enjoyable experience for sure. And I will absolutely go back and watch this a few more times. I might even buy this thing when it gets on Criterion, because the beauty of the film. And let's talk about that real quick here. I know we mentioned Jane Campion a few times here, but Steve, overall as a director, what do you really appreciate about what she was able to do with this movie?
Such a sure hand. I mean, part of it, it's funny. It's kind of something we said when we were talking about Drive My Car, is it takes a lot of confidence to go that slow, particularly in today's world. And that she is, and this is what's so interesting, is it's not spoon feeding you a plot. It's not saying, I mean, yes, you see what the conflict is, but you don't have a sense of where the movie is going. And she's just allowing it to develop in its own pace. I think that shows tremendous confidence. I think the look of the film obviously is incredible. The design of the film is just beautiful. And she really lets her actors, I'd be very curious to see how she works with actors. My guess is that she gives them a lot of freedom. You know, that's my guess. Like, I got great actors, go ahead. You know?
I agree with you, Steve, as we're going to reiterate this again. Such a sure hand as a director. It's clear she knew how she wanted to shoot this film. It's pretty obvious that she knew exactly how she wanted to tell this story. I love the way she uses long distance shots, the kind of we've seen in westerns through doorways from behind, from farther away, the way she shoots the panorama of the scenery, the way she moves the camera in close, the way she tracks with the camera, especially when Rose is trying to give the hides to the Native American. I think it's Adam Beach actually in a small role there, rolling up to try to give him the hides. I love the way the camera moves across with her. So to me, I really enjoyed the placement and the movement of the cameras, the shots, the angles, the beauty and the lighting, the look of it, the cinematography, all of it really captures the West. And I was able to lose myself in the film. Even the shots in darkness and in light, you know, when Phil is in darkness doing the things that he's doing, and when he's more coming into light, especially when he shows up to the dinner there with the governor and everything, and has his back and forth with everybody. It's such an interesting approach for sure. And I love that each character is distinctly directed to be its own unique thing within the panorama of this entire film. And Campion, now I'm, now I feel even more strongly that she probably will win despite any kind of gaffes that she's made verbally with the Williams sister situation. I don't know how you can deny that she should be, either her or Steven Spielberg should win Best Director, in my opinion, for the Oscars. And let's get into that, Steve. Next, let's talk about what it's nominated for, what you think it has the best possibility. It's nominated. It's nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor for Benedict Cumberbatch, Best Supporting Actor for both Jesse Plemons and Kodi Smit-McPhee, Best Supporting Actress for Kirsten Dunst, Adapted Screenplay for Jane Campion, Cinematography for Ari Wegner, Best Film Editing for Peter Severis, Best Original Score for Johnny Green. We haven't even talked about the score, which I thought was great. Best Production Design, and Best Sound. So where do you see it winning its Oscars here, Steve, of the 11 categories it was nominated for?
It's funny. Something that you and I were talking about right before we went on camera is, man, this is a really good year. It really is. Like you and I both had issues with Don't Look Up, but but there's so many good performances. There's so much great cinematography. There are a bunch of good scores. Like it's actually a really tough year. My feeling, like, I really think that Will Smith is the person, he has best actor to lose.
Yeah.
I think it's not that all the other performances are really good, but I think it's Will Smith's year. So in that one, I think in supporting role, they're both really good performances. There's a thing that frequently happens, which is if you have two people nominated from the same film, it might cancel them out. And I still think Troy Kotsur is that's the most unique one. What else? What do you think?
But I agree. I think it's got. I think I'm in the best picture camp for this one. I think it's going to win best picture. I think odds are that Jane Campion will win best director. I do think Will Smith and not Cumberbatch will win best actor. I do think Troy Kotsur as well, and I also think Ariana DeVos will win out over Kirsten Dunst. Best adapted screenplay. It's tough for that one, Steve. I just feel like maybe too many people don't know this film as well, or this original book, and may not give it its credits overall for winning best screenplay. I think it has a very great shot at cinematography. I think the Dune score is pretty much going to win, but if this slid in there and won best score, I would not be surprised. As opposed to production design, I think it's a gorgeous production design, but I don't know if that's the one that I anticipate winning, or even best sound, to be honest with you. What do you think about the editing? Do you think this one has best film editing possibilities here?
So, in terms of editing, I would say no. And the reason, there's a balance frequently between the power of the cinematographer and the power of the editor. And if you asked the cinematographer and the editor before the film, what do you want? The cinematographer would tend to go, I want long shots and where everything plays in one. And the editor would go, give me lots of coverage so I can really cut up the film and do whatever I want. And that's sort of this tension. I think that Jane Campion put the camera in the right place and let the scene play out. And because of that, I go, this is not as much of an editor's movie. This is a cinematographer's movie. So that's where I kind of wouldn't give it in terms of editing, as opposed to, I don't think it'll win, but Tick, Tick, Boom, when you do a musical, you're going to shoot that song from a whole bunch of different angles. And then you think of particularly Tick, Tick, Boom, which I really like, that goes, it's all over the place in terms of how, moving in and out of reality and back and forth in time and singing and not singing, all this stuff. That's an editor's movie. That's really getting made in post. I think production design is a ridiculously difficult one. My vote is still Macbeth because I think it's the most unique. There's no other movie. It's so theatrical. There's nothing else that looks like it. But come on, West Side Story looks amazing. You can't argue with any, Guillermo del Toro should always be nominated for production design. Dune is amazing looking, and Power. They're all really great. How do you pick, Yeah,
I know. I wonder if it's going to be a default thing, where they're like, oh yeah, sure, Power of the Dog. Why not? I voted for best picture. It must have best production design. We shall see. All right. Any final words, Steve, on this film as we wrap up this discussion? Our longest discussion to date on any of these Best Picture nominees. So certainly this speaks volumes about how much there was to explore and discuss within this movie. Any final thoughts here?
Well, I'm just really curious. It's like, do you vote for the movie that they're all such really well-made movie, and to me, it's like, how many people are really going to feel like me and admire it but not like it as much? That's really the big question.
It's a good question. I agree. I think for me, I'm even more secure that I think it's going to win best picture. I think Coda is a phenomenal picture and I enjoy the hell out of it, but the artistry and the technical level of direction here in this film, it deserves an Oscar, and so I think it will absolutely win best picture at the end of the day. I know my compatriot Jeff Snyder would disagree because he's like, that's not it. Oscar voters just go, which film did you like? That's the one they vote for. I think there's much more involved here.
That's not true. I don't think that's true. Yeah.
Just a little crazy. I love him for that, though. All right. Well, there we go. That's our discussion here on The Power of the Dog. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Thanks to everyone who's been watching this series. Sorry we took a day off yesterday. Both of us were extremely busy. Me, really, I could not find the time. Steve was very kind to offer some time, but I could not find the time yesterday to set up time. So we're dropping a couple of these in a row. We'll drop them, all four of them, here as we head into Sunday for the ceremony for the Oscars. So thank you very much, Steve. thanks again, brother. We'll see each other again for a few more of these. And please let people know where they can find you and what you got going on.
They can find me at SR Morris on Twitter, SR Morris1 on Instagram. The Cine-Files, we're in the midst of Do the Right Thing, and it is coming out a little bit late because both you and I have been so busy. So I'm editing that. Yeah. And of course, Enterprise Incidents for Star Trek.
There you go. And as for me, you can follow me at The Rocha Says on Twitter and Instagram, as you see down there, and TikTok, and the Outlaw Nation on Twitch. Please subscribe to the channel down below. Hit that subscribe button, hit that bell button, so you see when we're dropping all the content we do here on the Outlaw Nation channel. And we'll talk to you next time with another episode here of this Oscar series on the Outlaw Nation for another Best Picture nominee. Y'all take care of yourselves until then. Peace.